Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, my interview guest is a futures and foresight practitioner, a lumina learning practitioner, and the author of the nonfiction book Relevant Future-Focused Leadership. Her name is Louise Mowbray, and here's my interview with Louise. Louise's answer to one of the questions was edited due to technical difficulties encountered during the interview. Louise Mowbray, did I pronounce your last name correctly?
I think Mowbray, as in mowing the grass. Yeah.
I'll start over here.
Yeah.
Louise Mowbray, welcome to Apollo Papyrus.
Thank you, Aaron. It's wonderful to be here.
Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Thank you, Aaron. I own a company called Mowbray by Design, which I founded in London in 2005. And before that, worked for listed companies, mostly in the investment banking, technology, and executive search sectors. And also lived for a short time, three and a half years in the Middle East. And then went back to London and founded the business I have today, which is a future-focused conscious leadership consultancy. So I think the conscious piece is quite important to me, and probably for a lot of the people that I work with. And I essentially do three things, although the nature of it or the flavor or the context has changed enormously over the last almost 19 years. And that is, I am a keynote speaker. I work with executive teams, so I coach and strategize with them and lead workshops and thinking sessions and things like that. And I also coach executives one-to-one. And of course, now I'm an author.
You are an ICF qualified coach as well as a qualified futures and foresight practitioner and lumina learning practitioner. What do all of those mean?
Right. So ICF, I guess, is the global qualification for executive coaches. And TFSX is a futures organization, so futures and strategic foresight. And I'm trained in that. And Lumina Learning Practitioner, that means that I'm trained in behavioral science, profiling, which I use a lot with corporate clients and individual clients to give them insight into their personalities and how they work together as a team. So, yeah, three different things, but they're all intertwined, I guess.
Without spoiling too much of your nonfiction book, Relevant Future-Focused Leadership, what is it about?
It's essentially a look into where we're at. I almost call this book Context, simply because we know that as the context changes, so too must we. And yet we're really slow to change. We're really slow to adapt and adjust. And over I would say, especially the last 10 to 15 years, there have been a series of skills and ways of understanding the world that I believe that leaders increasingly need. In fact, I believe they need them right now. We're sitting almost we're right in it, actually. We're not on the precipice of anything. We're smack bang in the middle of the beginning of a new era of work. And if anything has highlighted all of that for us, it was a pandemic which shifted how we relate to work and our place in it. And then, of course, a couple of global wars, and I should say regional wars. And then, of course, ChatGPT arrived a year and 4 or 5 months ago and has shifted how we actually work with technology in our organizations, and will continue to do so as various technologies come of age and converge.
The next three questions I have are all going to give our listeners a better understanding of your book. What is future-focused leadership, and why is it vital for leaders to develop this way of being in the world?
Future-focused leadership is about having a developing various different lenses on the world or ways of understanding what's going on around us so that we can make sense of it and make better decisions in the moment. Of course, the future is a construct. We're not there yet. It's right here. It's all about the decisions we're making today. And we all feel, I'm sure, the sense of working with complex situations and the level of uncertainty that comes with it. And wherever there is complexity, there is uncertainty. And wherever there is uncertainty, it also produces an acute stress response. So future-focused leadership is really about developing a set of ways of filtering the world so that whatever comes our way, we're better equipped to deal with it and navigate our way forward.
What makes one future fit, and how can people develop these skills, traits, and competencies in themselves?
Yeah, it's a long list, Aaron. I've written a lot about what makes us future ready, future fit. I'm not that mad about being future proof. I don't think any of us can ward off the future, or nor should we try to. There are 22 skills, attributes, ways of understanding the world that I've listed in the book, which include things like being creative, being able to work with ambiguity, understanding what complexity actually is, and being able to make sense of things, sense making. And I've just mentioned a few, but also conscious leadership, because of course, at the root of all things is the ability, or certainly the focus on getting to know ourselves really well. Because when we do that, we're able to make conscious choices in very difficult situations, or situations where we have no idea what the outcome will be. And increasingly, that's happening for leaders, across sectors in all countries, day to day. So it makes for a very tricky situation. And of course, there's so much amazing research out there at the moment that shows that anytime you're sitting with a group of people in business, in some sort of business context, a meeting of some sorts, one just has to look around the room and understand that 38% of the people present are actually feeling the effects or symptoms of burnout. And another 50% are reporting symptoms of mental health issues. So what we're all finding it really difficult to be able to make sense of what's going on and act accordingly. So yeah, all of these attributes are things that really it serves us incredibly well to develop for ourselves. And if we're leading teams, to help the people in our teams to develop them for themselves.
What is conscious leadership, and why is self-awareness the foundation of all personal growth and development?
Yeah, I often when I'm asked to deliver a keynote, I get up on stage and I'll say something, a sort of throwaway comment like "know thyself" and then "get thyself out of the way." So conscious leadership is really, all self-development is a loop between self-awareness, self-knowledge, and self-mastery. And conscious leadership is developing our self-awareness and our self-knowledge and self-mastery to the level whereby something comes along and we might perhaps normally just react. I often think of push-button salivate, as in Pavlov's dogs. After we just react in a situation, we don't actually think through what would be the best or most appropriate response in that particular situation. So conscious leadership helps us to know ourselves well enough to be able to step back from our thoughts and feelings for a moment and make conscious decisions. And the idea of conscious leadership is that we create transformation within ourselves that then enables us to help those around us create the same for themselves. So for me, it's the foundation of all things. It's not the latest flavor in leadership. It's not, suddenly we need to be empathetic leaders, or next year we need to be courageous leaders, or, we pick some sort of personality attribute or trait. Conscious leadership really is at the foundation of all of those things. And I think getting to know ourselves well and being able to make conscious choices in the moment when it might be difficult or stressful leads to very different outcomes, both within ourselves and other people.
The next three questions are going to be about you writing and getting your book published. How long did it take you to write your book?
I started last April and I was done by August. And I didn't write this book. This book wrote me. So it grabbed me and would not let me go until it was done. So, yeah. And then, of course, came the editing and the getting it out. So, yeah, it was probably a comparatively short period of time, and perhaps in comparison to a lot of other authors. But the content has all been brewing for a very long time, and it needed to happen.
What were the easiest and hardest parts of writing a book for you?
I think the realization, I'd co-authored a book along with 30 other authors called Uncertainty at the beginning of last year. We published it. And it was for a global think tank, and I joined the editorial board. So I had a feel of how books are produced and what's needed to get them out and the editing phases and everything else. And I think the switch sort of flipped in my mind. And I suddenly thought to myself, well, I've written a couple of pieces for this book. Why not keep going? So the writing part, the actual writing every day, was probably the easiest part. In fact, I couldn't find enough time to do it. And it would wake me up at 4:30, 5 a.m. and just to grab an extra couple of hours out of the day. And it pretty much wrote me. The hardest part, I would say, was the editing. And it's always tricky trying to cut things back in a way that is clear and easily understood. That was the hardest part.
Is your book self-published, traditionally published, or hybrid published?
Self-published. And I was fortunate. I was very lucky to be connected with a couple of people in the publishing industry. And I had the advice from a #1 best-selling author, a friend of a friend, and another, and somebody who had been a figure in the publishing industry for a long time. And they all said to me, Louise, don't bother with publishing through an organization unless you have 50,000 followers. And so that was just made the decision-making really easy for me. And I went the self-publishing route.
Do you plan on, or are you considering writing more books? And if so, what are some ideas you have for books you have in mind?
Yeah, I think my focus, without a doubt, is always about helping or supporting or advising leaders to become better at what they do and to cope with our changing context more easily. So I'm always steering towards understanding our context better and being able to pass that knowledge and wisdom onto my clients. I mean, that's kind of a natural place for me to play. So that may well happen. The other thing is that I'm collaborating with somebody on a nonfiction book, which is futures focused. So really looking at the basis of probably various different trajectories about where things are going in the world, and looking at developing various characters. So we're in the middle of that right now, and that's a lot of fun, actually. I hadn't thought I'd ever write nonfiction, but that's going on in the background at the moment.
Now, the next question I have, last couple of questions I have are not related to your book, but are important questions for me to ask. How will artificial intelligence change our working environments and our place in it?
Enormously, but not all at once. Often, of course, if we're selling publications, we're selling on the basis of probably a whole lot of scary headlines and clicks, comments, and likes. So, a lot of the headlines that we see are designed to engage us, but they're not necessarily accurate in terms of timing. So I think some things will happen faster than we expect, and other things will happen more slowly. If we just simply think of the adoption of technology, right now, I could possibly, the technology is fully available now, but I could send you a hologram, Aaron, to come and sit and have this interview with you directly, wherever you are, or you could send your hologram to me. But would we want to do that? So the key thing is not only what's possible, but what people actually adopt, what we bring into our day-to-day lives and our working lives. I think that there'll be a lot of parts of jobs that are really dull and boring and that repetitious, that we will happily embrace as part of our, AI as a co-pilot to what we're up to day. But one of the things I write quite a lot about is leading in an AI-infused world, living in an AI-infused world. And the fact that ethics become vitally important, humanities become vitally important, because we need to put human beings at the center rather than technology. I mean, technology is amazing, and yes, also we'll be able to do all sorts of extraordinary things as various different emergent technologies converge over the coming years. And I really sort of see the next decade as being quite dramatically impactful. But at the same time, we adapt and we adjust and we have a look at the parts that actually support us in what we're up to. And I think that what we really need to do is make sure that we've got what we call IA, or intelligent augmentation, at the center of things. In other words, technology augments our ability to get our jobs done and to do them well, and to remove a lot of the stuff that is just too dull for words. And that means simultaneously that we need to develop those uniquely, innately human skills that perhaps we haven't valued as much over recent years, or certainly since the Industrial Revolution. We need to put humans at the center of things. And as people working in business environments, focus on the things that are uniquely, innately human, that differentiate us and enable us to work better with AI as some sort of co-pilot. And that is our ability to be creative and innovative and imaginative. Because ultimately, the types of decision-making that needs to be taken isn't just about an algorithmic left or right, up or down, right or wrong. It's about being able to understand everything at play and bring that to the fore.
One final question. You host the Lift with Louise Mowbray podcast. What can listeners expect from a typical episode of your podcast?
Yeah, LIFT is an acronym for Lead into the Future Today. So really, with a focus on the future, what do we need to do? What do we need to develop within ourselves? And how can we connect the dots of what's actually going on now and what is very likely in terms of the future? And as I said right at the start, the future is a construct. Essentially, every decision we make today is creating the future that we will need to live in tomorrow, or in a year's time, or 2 or 3 or 10. And we have a lot of agency over that. So, yeah, it's very much focused on talking to people who are doing interesting things in a conscious way in various different industry sectors around the world.
Louise, thank you for appearing on Apollo Papyrus. You were an amazing guest.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you for having me, and right back at you.
Louise was a wonderful guest to interview. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to write and read your passion. Bye for now. Remember to subscribe to the Apollo Papyrus YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/@ApolloPapyrus and the Apollo Papyrus Substack newsletter at apollopapyrus.substack.com. Y'all can visit the Apollo Papyrus website at campaaronapollo.wixsite.com/Apollo Papyrus and follow Apollo Papyrus on Threads, Instagram, Facebook, and Tumblr at Apollo Papyrus. Copyright 2024, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.